Today, I'm going to show you guys how I color graded my favorite clips from the Osmo Pocket 3 review. Before we get started, I just want to tell you guys to get everything right in camera first before you start grading or color correcting. No matter how good of a colorist you are, if you have an under or overexposed footage, you might be able to fix a little bit of it, but again, you won't get the best possible outcome. Always nail your exposure, make sure there's lighting contrast in your shots, or else if everything looks flat in the first place, color grading won't save that. Now that's out of the way, let's head into DaVinci Resolve and let's start color grading. So I want to explain my node tree first before we get started so that you know why I'm doing things like these, okay? So the very first one is our CST, which is your color space transform. The D-Log M footage is actually not D-Log, because if it was D-Log, we would put the input color space as DJI Log, which is DJI D-Gamut, and the input space would be DJI Log. But we're not filming in D-Log. We're filming in D-Log M, which is actually a Rec 709 clip that has a custom curve. So we're going to go back to Rec 709, and we are going to do Gamma 2.4. Now that we know our input color space, we're going to set it to sgamma3.cine for Sony and Sony S-Log3. Just because I'm more familiar with this, this is not really going to give you any colors at all. This is just my preferred color space. And since D-Log M is Rec 709, that's not going to give you any boost in terms of this transformation. It's just giving me that space, but it's still kind of empty in terms of the color information inside. You know what I mean? Because Rec 709 to start with is, let's just say, this small. And then if we transform it to the S-Log gamut, it's going to be a little bit bigger. But we're expanding this information into this. So it won't fill all of that space in terms of the S-Log color space. So we're just bringing it to a higher bandwidth sort of thing. So this basically doesn't do anything but give you an S-Log3 container, but that's it. It's not going to magically give you any more information. It's not going to magically make D-Log M, which is Rec 709, into an S-Log footage. Let's move on to the Sony Rec 709 LUT. This is basically the default one. If we go to LUTs and we go to Sony, this is what I used. I can even reset this and show you what I actually used. It's the low contrast 709. The next one is exposure. This is where we adjust the exposure so that we kind of balance everything out so that it's more pleasing instead of this kind of high contrast look. And then I put a green adjust because I'll explain a little bit later. I just don't like the greens on the D-Log M that's coming out of the Osmo Pocket 3. And then blue desaturation because the blues and the teals are a little bit saturated and it's kind of sometimes messing up with my footage. And then skin tones if there's people in the shots, and then white balance. And then we have my LUT, just a stylized LUT, just in case you want to add a little bit more oomph to it. You don't need to put a LUT because once you get everything in place, it actually looks kind of decent already. This is what I mean about trying to get everything right in camera first before you put it in color grading, because color grading should be an extra plus from a good footage, from a good base. There it is. We're looking at my first favorite clip on here because one, we have a ray of light hitting the center of the frame, and then the ambient light is pretty good as well. And this was right before a rainstorm, and you can see the clouds over here. Okay, so the first node right here is our Rec 709 to S-Log3. Just to go through everything, color space transform, I'm gonna hit that here, and then we're gonna go Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, and then S-Log, S-Gamut 3.cine, and then S-Log3. Now again, this is going to put us into the S-Log color space. And again, it's not going to magically give us any additional data, color data. on your footage. After we convert it, we're going to go to LUTs and we're going to go to Sony or whatever conversion LUTs you want to apply. I'm just going to do the low contrast 709. And from here, we're going to just turn off LUTs again. We're going to adjust the exposure because, again, the middle part is a little bit hot. The exposure, if we look at the waveforms, it's quite too much of brightness in there. So we're going to go to exposure node, make sure editable splines is on. And from here, the curves, I have a complete tutorial on how to compress highlights, and I'm just going to quickly show you guys how it is. But if you are interested, there is a full video about this. So I am going to just make sure that this is pleasing, and then we're going to make sure that we're bringing the blacks back to the image and just lifting it a little bit more to get kind of like a higher dynamic range look. Now everything is looking soft now and a little bit balanced. Maybe it's a little bit too dark, so we're gonna go to gamma. This is gonna lift up your mids, your levels. It's similar to dragging this towards the middle because it's lifting your mids up. But the issue is that if I pull this to the left, it also lifts up my highlights, which I need to compress it more in terms of exposure, and I don't want to do that. So we're just going to go back. We're going to leave it as it is, and then we're going to go to the primaries, and we're just going to lift this up a little bit higher so that we get a little bit more information on here. Now it's looking a little lifted, and I'm just going to bring this point back down, and let's see how it looks. That's perfect. That's great. Perfect. So that's good. Now, the greens on this one, I find it's just a little bit off. So we're going to go to the hue versus saturation. I want it a little bit moodier because if we drag this point all the way down, you can see that the colors are being sucked out of it just a little bit. That's good. Again, I like high contrast and kind of like moody look. So this is how I do it. If I want like a little bit more punchier on the greens, you can as well. It just depends on what look you're going for. But for me, I like it a little bit desaturated. And then if we zoom in here, you can see that these building windows are a little bit saturated. I'm going to show you actually later as well on the other clips why I tend to desaturate these blues on the Osmo Pocket. So again, we're going to go to hue versus saturation, and we're just going to hit this point right here. We are going to make sure that we're spreading out the 2 points. And as you can see on this waveform, that the blue is peaking all the way up. That means that this is saturated, too saturated. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a desaturation on here, and that's good enough. Now, I find that this footage is a little dull, so we're just going to include a little bit more contrast in there, and then maybe highlight contrast. Perfect. So let's see what we've done. We started from here, and after the exposure, green adjust, and blue desaturation, this is what it looks like. I actually want to touch on the hue versus hue as well. So we kind of changed that color of the greens to a little bit more greener, because currently right now it's a little bit yellowy. So in terms of trees, foliage, like greenery, there's always a mix of yellows and greens. So it's up to you to kind of like make sure to dial in the look that you want. I kind of want it a little bit more greener. And since we desaturated it, it's not going to look like digital green. I'm going to show you guys how it looks. If we push this look, like exaggerate this, it just looks like like a green screen, like fake trees. So watch out for that as well. Hue, saturation, and then just a little bit of that. And that's good. Look at that. Then the next one is skin tones. This is where I adjust the skin tones just in case there's a person in frame. And since there's not, we're just going to leave it empty. And then this is my white balance node where I can just give it a little bit of a warmth and a little touch of a green in there. So it's exactly how I saw it in person. It was a little bit yellowish, warmish side when I was filming this. And then finally, we're going to add a LUT, film LUT pack. And I'm going to go with the creative LUT, the film-based LUT, because this one is my favorite. Right now, it's a little bit too much because it has the full look. And I'm just going to make it like maybe 40%, 50%. Now, on this one, you can add whatever LUTs you want, or you can maybe skip it. It's not important. As long as you have a great base, you can color grade your heart's content into your footage. But this is just an easy way for me to bake in the look that I've already created before. So I'm not dragging a power grade in. And it's just an easy way, an efficient way for me to color my videos so that I don't have a lot of nodes on here. And that is that. Now, what I do if I have a similar scene, all I have to do is like apply grade from there. And then from here on, since I've adjusted everything, I'm just going to adjust the exposure so that it's well balanced again. And I kind of want this a little bit higher up so we get this. And I'm okay with this being this dark because, you're playing on the shadows. If we lift this up like you saw earlier, it's a little bit, it has this lifted look and I don't like that. So we're going to keep it kind of realistic. And this is how the footage turned out. And I want to show you guys actually why we desaturated the blues. And we're going to turn this off. If you look here, it's a little bit way too saturated for the sky. And if we look at here, it's just, a little bit too saturated. So now for low light is a little bit different. We're still going to adapt the same node tree. And what we're going to do differently is that we're going to delete the LUT and we are going to reset this grade. I'm going to go to LUTs and I'm just going to go with my LUT as well. Luna Blue. Again, you can use any LUT, conversion LUTs to your heart's content. But for me, I like to use my LUTs because they are my colors. Okay, so from here on, we are going to just turn these off. And I'm going to turn on the white balance. This is too blue, and we're going to just bring back a little bit of that warmth so that it's kind of true to life. And maybe a little bit of more of magenta in there. Now, the footage looks well balanced. This is kind of like how I saw it in person. We're going to move on to exposure. And this is already blown out. And that's the con about this camera. The dynamic range isn't that good. And again, we can't expect it to perform like an FX3. So in this case, I let the highlights blow out and make sure the ambient has decent exposure, which I captured decently in this case. So I'm just going to lift this up a little bit more so we get more of that sky. And I'm just going to crush a little bit more of that blacks. Now for the greens, it's a little bit warmish on this one. So I'm just going to go to hue versus hue. And I'm going to extend this. So it's the colors yellow and green that I'm shifting. And I'm just going to pull it to the greener side. And I'm happy with that. Now with the blue desaturation, we're just going to go hue versus saturation. And then this is peaking blue right now. And that's because the scene is blue dominant. So I'm just going to bring this a little bit down so it's not sucking out all the blues. Because if we do this, it's just going to be like grayish, and I don't like that. We need to add some colors in there. Now, if you want to up the saturation by any chance, what I would do is after this blue saturation, I would just like do this. Or if you have a color that you want to saturate individually, let's just say this orange, you want that to be, I don't know, like more saturated, you can just do so with the hue versus saturation curves. And then now I'm done with this grade. From here on, I can add glow, I can add halation, I can add prism blur. And again, I have tutorials on those if you are interested. And then from here, I'm just gonna reset that. And once we apply grade on this one, this is basically almost done, but we're just gonna play with the white balance and bring back that blue and give it a little bit more magenta. Now, this wasn't kind of true to life, but it's a little bit more stylized than I wanted to be. And this is how I did it. Basically, once I start a grade, I just copy them and adjust to how it is. All right, so this one is a clip that I want to show you guys why moving into S-Log3, and rather than using D-Log MLUT from DJI, if we turn it off and let's put the DJI D-Log MLUT, it's just oversaturating everything and it doesn't look quite good, especially the highlights. It's going to blow it out for some reason, and the LUT that they created for it isn't too intuitive. So let's try to recover it with their compression technique that we have. And you can see here that the faces of the toys are blown out, while if we turn this off, you can see that here we get more retention on the highlights. Yes, this is still blowing out, but on here, everything is already flat and we don't get that information anymore. So it just gives us maybe a little bit more leeway in that different color space, and that the DJI LUT isn't well made per se. So we're just going to kind of do our grade so that we squeeze out the best out of the Pocket 3. That's it. That's my D-Log color grading workflow for the Osmo Pocket 3. And if you do have any questions at all, feel free to comment down below or message me on Instagram. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.